The room was quiet except for the slow ticking of the grandfather clock that stood near the fireplace, a relic from their childhood home. Now part of the estate they were both here to discuss. Emma sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap, her knuckles pale against the dark fabric of her trousers. She felt as though she was holding her breath, except she wasn't sure she had taken one since the lawyer started speaking. Beside her, Lily appeared calm, almost too calm, her legs crossed and a slight smile playing at the corner of her lips. It wasn't smug, not quite, but it wasn't sorrowful either. Bull had been red. Their father, Harold Whitman, had died 2 weeks earlier, and despite being ill for over a year, his death hit Emma like a freight train. She had been his caregiver in the final months, moving back into the family estate to help with doctor visits, hospital trips, and late-night emergencies. She had watched his strong frame weaken, his voice tremble, his memories scatter. Through it all, she never imagined that his death would come with strings attached. Not like this. But the lawyer's voice had been clear. According to Harold Whitman's instructions, a portion of the estate, approximately 78% of the total value, is to be transferred to his biological child. In light of statements he included in the codicil, a paternity test is required to confirm the rightful heir. Emma's head had snapped up at that. Paternity test? She asked, her voice breaking slightly. Why? The lawyer, a middle-aged man named Richard Hale, adjusted his glasses and looked apologetic but firm. Your father made an addendum to the will shortly after his diagnosis. He expressed concerns about events from the past and wanted to be absolutely certain. Both of you will need to submit to a DNA test. If Emma is not biologically his daughter, the larger portion of the inheritance will default to Lily. It felt like the ground was shifting beneath her. Emma blinked, her mouth dry. She looked to Lily, who shrugged gently as if to say, "Don't look at me." Their mother had always been a complicated woman. Years ago, she had confessed to an affair during a period when their parents were going through a rough patch. Emma had been 16 at the time, and the confession had caused a temporary separation between their parents. But everything had appeared to return to normal, or so Emma thought. Apparently, the doubt had lingered in their father's mind longer than he had ever let on. Despite the crushing sense of betrayal, Emma agreed to the test. There was nothing to hide, she thought. She was his daughter. Of course she was. She had his eyes, his mannerisms, his calm way of handling chaos. The test would only confirm what she already knew. The testing process was handled by a third-party laboratory selected by the estate's legal team. Both sisters were asked to attend a scheduled appointment at the same clinic on the same day. The procedure was quick, a cheek swab, a few identity confirmations, and they were sent on their way. The administrator assured them that the barcode kits would be handled securely and anonymously to preserve fairness. Emma didn't question it. Why would she? Still, as the days passed, she couldn't shake the unease. It wasn't about the result. She had full confidence in that, but about the situation. There was something unnerving about proving your identity to your dead father's legal representative. She found herself staring at old photo albums late into the night, searching for resemblances in the pictures. Her father holding her at the beach when she was a toddler, the way he grinned when she graduated college, the way he kissed her forehead when she cried over her first heartbreak. Could those moments really be in doubt? The result came a week later. She received a call from the law office asking her to come in. When she arrived, Lily was already seated in the same leather chair she had occupied during the will reading. Richard Hale looked uncomfortable as he slid the envelope across the table. The lab results indicate that you, Emma Whitman, are not the biological daughter of Harold Whitman. For a moment, Emma genuinely believed she had misheard. She stared at him, waiting for a correction. When none came, her hands trembled as she opened the document. She didn't understand the percentages and the terminology, but the summary was clear: non-paternity confirmed. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Her heart pounded in her ears like a warning drum. She glanced at Lily, who tilted her head sympathetically. "I'm so sorry, Emma," she said gently, placing a hand on Emma's forearm. "This doesn't change how I feel about you. You'll always be my sister." Emma jerked her arm away, not out of anger, but out of confusion. "That's not possible," she whispered. There must be some mistake. Maybe the samples got mixed up. Hale shook his head slowly. The lab is certified and follows strict chain of custody procedures. I'm afraid the results are final. Lily stood up, pulling her coat over her shoulder with practiced grace. You should talk to Mom, she said before walking out. Maybe she can give you clarity. Emma was left in the office alone, the letter shaking in her hand. Her identity, her inheritance, her entire sense of belonging, swept away by a single test result. Back at home, she confronted her mother, who looked shocked and confused. What do you mean you're not his daughter? She asked, clearly blindsided. Emma, that's impossible. He was your father. He was there always. But doubt hung heavy in the air. And without proof, all that remained were memories, now fractured by a scientific document. Emma tried to make peace with it. She moved out of the estate to a modest rental nearby. Her mother checked in constantly, trying to reassure her. Lily, meanwhile, moved into the family home, now hers by law. She began redecorating almost immediately, tearing out the old kitchen, repainting the rooms, and installing a home office. Emma watched it all unfold from the outside, helpless to stop it. The estate, the inheritance, the life she had assumed would one day be hers. It was all gone. Not because of a stranger's betrayal, but because of a sister's silence. Or so she thought. Weeks passed. Emma returned to her job as a freelance designer and tried to distract herself with work. But something gnawed at her constantly. The image of Lily's face during the will reading. That tiny smirk. The too perfect timing of her statements. And above all, the quiet confidence she displayed from the very beginning. Something wasn't right. Emma didn't have evidence, only instinct. But sometimes instinct is where every truth begins. And that truth, though buried deep, was about to be unearthed in the most unexpected way. The days after the DNA result felt like trudging through fog. Emma moved on autopilot, waking, working, answering emails, declining calls, ignoring messages from Lily. Her mind kept drifting back to the sterile white clinic room, the swab, the lawyer's calm voice, and that document with its cold conclusion. She had tried everything, contacted the lab, asked the lawyer if there was an appeal process, even considered a private test, but nothing seemed to matter. Her heart pounded too loudly in her ears for any quiet to settle. The next morning, she contacted an independent forensic genetics consultant she found online, a man named Dr. Randall Ford, based in Bristol. She sent him an email explaining she suspected DNA tampering, attaching no files but asking for a consultation. He replied that same day, requesting a Zoom call. During the call, he listened carefully to her story, then asked her to securely upload the raw data files for comparison. She used a secure file-sharing link he provided and waited. The estate had already been transferred. The money, the house, the art, and the investments all gone. What hurt the most wasn't the inheritance. It was the erasure. She had built a lifetime of memories with the man she knew as her father. To be told, clinically and conclusively, that she wasn't his was like someone had cut her roots. She felt unmoored. Lily, for her part, had handled the transition with efficiency that Emma found too convenient. She hired estate planners, redecorated the house, fired the old gardener, and began hosting wine evenings for her friends. She even sent Emma a formal email offering to help with any transitional costs, as if she were a stranger. Emma didn't respond. Instead, she buried herself in freelance projects, logos for startups, branding guides for consultants, some architectural visualizations. But despite the distractions, one evening she found herself wandering mentally again. She needed to print a few scanned documents for a client, and her own printer had jammed beyond salvation. She remembered that Lily's old laptop was still at the apartment they had shared during university. It had been passed down to Emma when Lily upgraded years ago, and Emma had tossed it into her storage cabinet. She dug it out, connected it to power, and waited as it groaned back to life. The desktop wallpaper was a grainy photo of the two of them at a beach bonfire. Emma stared at it for a long second before launching the File Explorer. She navigated to her USB stick, ready to move the files. But Just as she was about to close the window, a folder name caught her eye. NA_Kit_2024. Her chest tightened. She hadn't been looking for anything, hadn't come with suspicion, but now her hand hovered over the trackpad, uncertain. A part of her whispered to respect privacy. Another part whispered louder, "You deserve to know." She opened it. Inside were several files, PDFs, screenshots, 2 sets of DNA, raw data, labeled with long alphanumeric codes. One was marked with a timestamp from the week of the clinic appointment. Another was labeled alt_sample_.txt. Her palms began to sweat. There was also a screenshot of instructions from the testing company's website, how to submit a manual kit using barcode input. Emma felt her stomach drop. She clicked on the alt_sample file and opened it in a text editor. She didn't understand the jumble of letters and SNP codes, but she recognized the general structure. She minimized it and opened her own DNA test file, the one she had paid for years ago through a different company out of curiosity. She remembered downloading her raw data back then, and she still had it on her main laptop. She retrieved it now, dragging it onto the screen and aligning it side by side with the alt_sample. Her pulse quickened as she scanned both. The top markers matched. So did the next, and the next. Emma wasn't a geneticist, but she knew enough to recognize identical data. She froze. If this file, the one labeled alt_sample, was submitted in her name, and it was identical to Lily's DNA, then that meant Lily had used her own sample under Emma's barcode. And the other sample? Emma now suspected that Lily submitted Emma's DNA as her own. She switched them. Shaking, Emma began collecting everything. She copied the folder onto her USB stick. She screenshotted the file metadata, showing last accessed and modified dates. She wrote down the barcode ID numbers visible in one of the PDFs. She had no idea what she would do next, but she knew she couldn't let this go. By midnight, Emma had emailed herself a zipped archive of all the files and logged everything in a spreadsheet. She didn't sleep that night. She barely blinked. It took 3 days. On the 4th morning, she received his email. "Emma, I've compared the files. Based on the SNP pattern and matching analysis, I can confirm that the sample submitted under your barcode matches the genetic profile of the second file, the one labeled as your sister's. This strongly suggests deliberate sample substitution. The metadata further supports your timeline. Please let me know how you'd like to proceed. I am willing to draft a report if required." Emma exhaled shakily. It was real. She wasn't paranoid. She wasn't imagining things. Her sister had stolen her identity, not by name or bank card, but by blood. The next step was clear. She needed legal help. Not from Hale, her father's lawyer, but someone impartial. She found a solicitor who specialized in inheritance fraud and data misuse. Catherine Doyle, a stern but sympathetic woman who asked for a meeting in her office. Emma printed everything. Dr. Ford's letter, the metadata screenshots, file comparisons, and walked in with the weight of 1,000 questions in her bag. Catherine reviewed everything for an hour in silence. When she finally spoke, her words were calm and sharp. "This is not just a civil matter," she said. "This could constitute fraud, computer misuse, and possibly breach of estate administration rules. But first, we'll need to send a formal complaint to the DNA testing laboratory and request an audit of the barcode assignment process. We'll also submit a letter of claim to your sister, outlining the evidence and requesting restoration of your share of the estate." Emma swallowed hard. "What happens if she refuses?" "Then we go to court," Catherine said simply. "And I assure you, we'll have a strong case." That night, Emma sat on her balcony, a blanket around her shoulders, the USB drive still in her hand. She looked up at the stars, not for guidance, but for grounding. So much had unraveled so quickly, and still, beneath the betrayal, beneath the anger, was heartbreak. She had trusted Lily. As children, they'd shared bunk beds, secrets, and whispers in the dark. She never imagined that her sister would orchestrate something so cruel, so calculated, just to take what was meant to be shared. Emma didn't want revenge. She wanted justice, and she wanted her father's truth restored. The fight had just begun. Emma had never envisioned herself walking into a courtroom, let alone one where she'd be seated across from her own sister. But the day had arrived. The weeks leading up to it were consumed by legal drafts, formal letters, document bundles, and a level of anxiety that clung to her like a second skin. Catherine Doyle had been exact in her preparation, sending a formal letter of claim to Lily with a clear summary of the evidence and a proposal to settle the matter out of court by reverting the estate to its intended distribution. Lily's reply came not from her directly, but through her solicitor, a man named Graham Ellis, who responded with casual coldness. My client denies any wrongdoing. There is no conclusive evidence the samples were switched by her, and she maintains the DNA results reflect reality. Emma sat across from Catherine in the law office when they read that letter. Catherine's expression never changed. She merely sighed, tapped her pen on the table, and said, "Then we escalate." Filing the civil suit involved presenting everything: the metadata logs, Dr. Ford's expert report, the raw data files, and even the screenshots from Lily's laptop. To Emma's surprise, Catherine also requested access to the email Emma had sent herself when she discovered the files. "Time-stamped evidence of your chain of discovery," she explained. Emma provided it, along with a notarized copy of her original DNA test from 3 years prior, which further matched the sample that had been wrongly attributed to Lily. But evidence wasn't everything. Court was different. Court was emotionless, procedural, and painfully slow. The hearing date was set for a Thursday in late autumn. Emma spent the night before staring at the ceiling of her small flat, her thoughts tangled like a knot of fishing wire. She couldn't stop thinking about her father. Would he be proud of her for fighting? Would he feel guilt for doubting her lineage in the first place? Or would he just be sad to see his daughters tearing each other apart in front of strangers in black robes? The courtroom was nothing like in the movies. No grand speeches, no slumming feasts, just calm voices, paperwork, and protocol. Lily arrived in a gray suit, polished and smiling slightly. Emma didn't return the look. She sat beside Catherine and stared straight ahead. The judge was an older woman with sharp eyes and a precise tone. After reviewing the opening statements, she allowed Dr. Randall Ford to testify via video link. He explained the raw data comparisons, the metadata timestamps, and the statistical impossibility of the two samples being mixed by accident. Under cross-examination by Lily's lawyer, he held firm. "No," he said clearly, "the digital fingerprint of the files shows intentional upload of one genetic profile using another person's barcode. This would require deliberate substitution, not a clerical error." The defense tried to argue that Emma's older laptop might have been accessed remotely or that a third party could have planted the files. Catherine asked the judge for a forensic report on the device. It was granted. 2 weeks later, the court-appointed digital forensics expert confirmed the files had originated from Lily's user account and that there was no indication of remote access or tampering by outside parties. With that, the tide began to turn. Emma's testimony came last. Her voice trembled as she recounted how she found the folder, how the discovery crushed her, and how the betrayal by her sister was worse than the inheritance loss. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. Her calm hurt was more powerful than tears. Lily's defense crumbled quietly. When she took the stand, her lawyer tried to maintain the denial, but the judge's questions were direct. "Can you explain why these files were on your laptop?" Lily fumbled. I don't remember downloading them. I might have been comparing data." "Why would you be comparing DNA data unrelated to your own test?" "I was curious," Lily said weakly. The judge pressed again. "And the barcode?" "The exact barcode used to identify your sister's test kit. How did you obtain that?" Lily hesitated. "It was visible on the paperwork." She left it on the table. "I wasn't thinking." "So you admit you saw it?" Lily faltered. "Yes, but I didn't." "That's enough," the judge said firmly. It was over. A week later, the court issued its judgment. The DNA test result that had invalidated Emma's inheritance was declared null due to fraud. The estate was to be re-evaluated and redistributed according to the original terms of Harold Whitman's will. The court also ordered Lily to pay back any liquid funds she had accessed from the estate: investments, savings, and the remainder of the home sale proceeds from an antique property she had offloaded months earlier. The judgment was clear. Lily had committed deliberate fraud by manipulating DNA test results to redirect an inheritance that was not rightfully hers. Emma won, but it didn't feel like a victory. When she left the courtroom, she didn't celebrate. She didn't call anyone. She took a cab home and stared out the window, numb. The city buzzed around her. Cars honking, people hurrying, a man walking his dog, children laughing. Life went on. Back in her flat, she sat at the dining table, surrounded by silence. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt hollow. She had uncovered the truth. She had fought and won. But the cost had been immeasurable. The person who had shared her childhood, her laughter, her secrets, had betrayed her for money. Not out of necessity, not out of survival, but out of greed and bitterness. The estate's executor, who had stayed neutral throughout the legal battle, contacted Emma the following week to arrange the transition of assets. The house would be legally hers again. The remaining funds would be transferred over after an accounting review. Emma thanked him, but asked for everything to be delayed by a month. She wasn't ready. She didn't know what she would do with the house now. It felt tainted. Lily sent no apology, no message, nothing. Emma found herself scrolling through old photos again, ones of them as kids holding ice cream cones, playing dress-up, hugging their dad. She kept thinking, when did it all break? When did Lily become someone I couldn't trust? Or was she always this way, and I was just blind to it? There was one photo that haunted her, a candid shot from Christmas 6 years ago. Emma was laughing at something off camera, and Lily was looking at her. The expression in Lily's eyes was unreadable. Not anger, not jealousy, but something quieter, heavier. Like she had already decided something that Emma couldn't see. Now, the choice was clear. Emma would reclaim the estate, not for the money, but for her father, to restore what he had tried to do in his final days. He had doubted her, yes, but he had also tried to be fair. His will was meant to make peace with his uncertainty. It wasn't meant to destroy his daughters. She would honor that, but she wouldn't forgive Lily. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The first time Emma unlocked the front door to the house again, she stood still on the threshold for a long time. The hallway light flickered overhead, casting shadows against the cream-colored walls that now bore strange artwork Lily had hung during her short reign. The place didn't smell the same. It had a sterile, artificial citrus scent, probably from whatever air freshener Lily had installed. Emma walked slowly, letting her fingers brush against the banister, the same one she had slid down as a child. It was hers again, legally, officially, and irreversibly, but it didn't feel like home anymore. After the court ruling, Catherine had encouraged her to reclaim the house promptly, warning that leaving it unoccupied could result in issues, squatters, vandalism, insurance lapses. Emma had agreed, though she'd taken her time emotionally. She returned not with triumph, but with a quiet sense of duty. There was no grand plan, no celebration, just a simple checklist. Inspect the place, assess damage, decide what to keep, what to change, and what to sell. Room by room, she moved through the house. The study was untouched, except for a few open drawers and scattered mail. The living room still had their father's favorite recliner, though the cushions were replaced. The master bedroom had been repainted. The nursery across the hall, the one Harold had turned into an art studio in his last years, was gutted. Lily had tried turning it into a home gym, but abandoned the renovation midway. Emma sat on the floor of that room for over an hour, surrounded by the bare walls and bits of torn carpet. She tried to picture her father there, hunched over a canvas, a mug of tea beside him, the soft hum of jazz playing in the background. The memories came in waves, slow, painful, beautiful. He wasn't perfect. She knew that now more than ever. But he was hers. She had doubted it for a moment, let herself believe a sheet of paper over the years they'd lived. That guilt lingered. In the days that followed, Emma began cleaning. Not just dust and clutter, but memories too. She boxed up Lily's wine glasses and charcuterie boards, all still tagged from expensive designer stores. She found a drawer filled with unopened mail addressed to Miss Lily Whitman. Bank statements, boutique catalogs, spa memberships. She stuffed them all into a bag and dropped them off at Catherine's office, along with a request. Have her solicitor pick this up? She didn't want reminders. She didn't want fragments of a life that wasn't earned. One evening, while sorting through her father's closet, she found an old wooden box tucked behind his coats. Inside was a collection of handwritten letters, some dating back 2 decades. Many were addressed to her. They weren't dramatic declarations or life-changing revelations, just thoughts, reflections, notes from a father unsure how to express emotions in person. I saw you in the garden today with that little bird you were feeding. You're so kind. I hope that stays with you. You told me you want to be an artist. Your mother doesn't think it's practical. I don't either, but you should try. Even if you fail, you'll know. Sometimes I wonder if I deserve you. Your laughter feels like something borrowed from another life. Like I was given a gift I didn't earn. She cried that night, not in agony, but in mourning for everything lost: time, trust, connection. For the man who had doubted, but still loved her. For the sister who had once braided her hair and promised to always be by her side. Emma considered selling the house. Catherine had told her it was fully her choice now. But something held her back. She began working from the upstairs guest room, turning it into a studio. She painted again, nothing extraordinary, just shapes, colors, impressions. The kind her father would have called whispers of emotion. Slowly, she began inviting light back into the house. She also reached out to her mother. Their relationship had become strained, not because of blame, but from shared hurt. Her mother had insisted repeatedly that Harold was Emma's father in every way that counted. But the DNA test and the resulting chaos had reopened wounds neither of them knew were still there. Emma suggested dinner, quiet, private. They met at a small Italian place not far from the old neighborhood. I never thought she'd do something like that, her mother said, stirring her tea. But I also can't pretend I didn't help create the gap between you two. I should have told you both more, been honest earlier. Emma nodded. We were just kids. We were never equipped to handle adult silence. Her mother reached across the table, resting her hand on Emma's. I'm proud of you, and I know your father was too. You just didn't always know how to say it. I know, Emma said, and for the first time, she meant it. Weeks passed. Lily made no further contact. Word reached Emma through mutual acquaintances that Lily had moved to a different city, somewhere up north. Her social media accounts had gone dark, and the last anyone heard, she was working at a real estate agency. Emma didn't feel anger anymore, just distance. Like Lily had become a character in a story that ended years ago. But one afternoon, as Emma was returning from the post office, she found a letter in her mailbox. No return address. The handwriting was familiar. She opened it carefully. Emma, I don't expect forgiveness. I know I crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. I lied to get what I wanted, and I lost everything else in the process. I thought I was fixing something, balancing the scales. But all I did was burn the bridge between us. I wish I had said goodbye properly to Dad. I wish I hadn't let jealousy turn into cruelty. I hope one day you'll live in that house and not think of me. I hope you paint again, and I hope you find peace. Lily. Emma folded the letter and placed it in the same box where she kept her father's notes. She didn't respond. There was nothing more to say. That night, she stood on the balcony of the house and watched the sunset fall behind the line of trees at the back of the property. She felt tired but not broken. The truth had cost her, more than she ever thought she'd lose, but had also cleared the fog. Her name was hers. Her story was hers. No one could rewrite it with forged samples or digital lies. The inheritance was just money. The house was just walls. What mattered was what she rebuilt from the rubble. Her sense of self, her voice, her choices. She would never forget what happened, but she no longer needed to carry it like a wound. It had become a scar, and scars meant healing had begun.